Hello and welcome to another episode of the TF Cast.
Today with us, we have radio host Bob Pavlenko. And if you've owned or operated radio in Mankato in the last 20 years and stumbled across KMSU at 9 p.m. to 2, right?
9 p.m. to midnight.
To midnight.
Yeah.
You've probably heard a little bit of Here There Be Dragons. And I'm right in saying it, 20 years?
It'll be 20 years in August. Yeah.
20 years in August.
I started on KMSU kind of filling in late July of that year, of 2001. I had been on and off on other things, webcasts, and I was heavily involved in student radio when I was at MSU. And then that station got basically defunded and disbanded while I was still going. So some of us made connections with, from KRNR, made connections with KMSU. My dear friend John Bauer got a 1 hour slot for about a year or two, but then when he graduated, he was like, well, are you sticking around town? I'm like, I think so. He's like, do you want my show? And I'm like, sure. So I went on vacation, came back and kicked it off, came up with a name for the show and launched into it. And it was a 1 hour program at first, but then picked up, I'll get into that a little bit more. Go on.
Cool. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the really early history you were talking about there. There was a student radio organization.
Yeah, there was.
It just fell on hard times, or what?
Well, what happened was that it was KRNR. It was a cable FM station. So it actually we had back then Breslin, or was it Breslin Cable, I think, was had a partnership with the university so that you could get a cable splitter and run it to your stereo and you could get the station, and that was how you got it. So it wasn't like FM radio; it was cable FM.
Oh,
so it was essentially, it was kind of on the wayside by the time I was a freshman in college, and then I somehow got roped into student government through some friends I moved down to. I moved down here partially because I knew people and partially because it coincided with my academic goals. And I got shanghaied into student senate. And then somebody approached us saying, hey, they're trying to kill our station. And I went, yeah, no, they're not. I got angry immediately and got involved. And then I got really involved and ended up becoming, I was basically playing both sides in a way, but not in a sinister way. It was more like I was advocating for the radio station, but then I had a position in student government. And there were, for whatever reason, these people really thought they were like young Republicans, and they wanted to do away with what they thought was a waste of student fees. Like that should matter and like they should care about that, but they did. So they wanted to kill that radio station as some kind of gesture. And they did eventually. They eventually succeeded by arguing that, well, we don't actually have, a broadcast, we don't have any kind of academic program that actually coincides with this. There's no point in having it, so we shouldn't waste students' money on it. And that final year, we, between John and myself and a bunch of other people, we ended up with 40 volunteers. We did my first real radio experience was a 13-hour pledge drive, or signature drive rather, where I just brought every CD in my dorm room and then everything we had on hand that I thought I could play. And I just asked for support, played everything I could, and just ran with it for as long until I basically couldn't speak anymore.
That was still on cable.
Yeah.
That would have killed itself eventually, because I've never even heard of that. That's really kind of almost a dead format.
Right.
So what's the difference between what was that and what was KMSU, except for it's on the FM?
KMSU was never really a largely student-staffed station, at least not in the time that I was aware of. I think it was, I don't know exactly when, when that split or when that happened, but I mean, it was always kind of like KRNR was always the students station, and KMSU was the public radio affiliate that was tied to the university. So there are student workers at KMSU, but by and large, most of the volunteers are people that no longer attend college and haven't for decades.
Oh,
so there was that split, and there wasn't really room, I think, in the schedule for a lot of an influx of a lot of students. So when KRNR was taken down, only a few of us ended up on KMSU, and it was kind of already, a lot of things were already established. There are people that have been there longer than me even. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
There's actually there are 3 20th anniversaries this year for KMSU. There's Shuffle Function, of course, which is the probably the biggest, arguably the biggest program on the station, and then the Midwest Beatdown, the show before mine. And actually, I think Nick J's been doing radio in one capacity or another for maybe a year or two before that. So he's a soldier. He's been at it for a long time. So, congrats to Tim, Shelley, and Nick.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, talk about the beginning of your show a little bit.
Sure.
How did you come up with the name for it, and were you just that was just what you were into? And
I had leanings. I actually, when I started, it was kind of all over the place. I had some leanings toward extreme metal. I was in high school when the like death and black metal boom in the early 90s happened. So like my friends and I all kind of treated it like novelty music at the time. Mm-hmm. So we all kind of like designated our own death metal band. And then we kind of like got deeper in as we, when we did, kind of just fell into different bands. So it was kind of like all over that sort of metal spectrum. Initially, the name came from some stories I had heard about old maps of the medieval world, where if they didn't really know a territory, they'd put like "Here be monsters" or things like that. And since a lot of the music I was going to start launching into was from Scandinavian countries, and I'd seen that on a map, like an old fake map where it said "Here there be dragons," I was like, oh, easy, okay. So that was where that came from, and then. Initially, it was my brother and I who were the first 2 hosts of the show, and then he transferred to St. Cloud State. So then it was myself, and then various I got into a relationship with somebody, and then she became the co-host for a while, and then kind of off and on, I would have people in my personal life as part of the show, but it's been mostly just myself. It jumped from 1 hour to 2 hours when we actually had 3 metal shows for a while. We had Nick J had 1 hour for the Midwest Beatdown. We had another show called The Shift, hosted by Nick Iverson, who also worked for the rock station here in town. And when he moved over to that, he had to give up his 2 hours, and his contract stated he had a no compete clause. So Nick and I each got an hour, and then there was a talk show from 11 to midnight for many years for... Gosh, I'm trying to think now. Probably something around like 2008 or so until then, I believe. And when they were sort of dismissed, the show changed hands a few times, and finally the station manager at the time felt that it wasn't quite up to par anymore. So he let them go. And it was funny because it was a night where I was doing we're a public station, so we do pledge drives, and one of the rewards I came up with, instead of doing a day sponsorship, because I don't know, there'd probably be like torches and pitchforks if I was allowed to play Deicide around noon or something. So I came up with this thing where we would do an all-night show, and so if people, and we're still doing those actually, if you chip in $100 and work with me, I can come up with a all-night an all-night program. And there's one particular fan, a gentleman by the name of Tom out in the center, that he's a huge friend of the show. We've become really good friends, and he chips in for 2 of those every year. So I was about to launch into one of those. So I was just hanging out between, for that 1 hour before I was going to be on all night. And we got a call, and they, those guys were told, basically, you're done. We're going to find something else from 11 to 12. And I took it over for a little while. Then someone else did. For a bit, it was someone I was close to, and then when we kind of parted ways, I sort of reabsorbed that hour, and it's been that way ever since. So since about 2010, thereabouts, it's been a 3-hour program.
Yeah, it's a lot of music to put together for every week.
Yeah, it is.
What's your process like for getting through that? How much of this are you absorbing throughout the week?
It's usually a couple hours a night, or depends on how fast I want to work now. I used to overthink everything. It's funny because when it was an hour program, I would just sit there and brood over every single thing I was going to play. And then like even up until probably like 5 or 6 years ago, I still would weigh things a lot more heavily than I do now. Where now I think it's just confidence and just developing a better model or a better process for approaching it. But it really is something where now what I do is I sort of I kind of just pick a direction, or if there's a new release or there's something I haven't done in a while, and I just kind of land on it, and then I start forming something around that, like one or two bands. Lately, I've been doing a lot more stuff based around like the scenes from different countries, or even sometimes specific scenes. Like there's a Norwegian city that I'm trying to remember. It's called the Nidrosian black metal scene. And it's about like Nidaros used to be the name of that city. I can't remember the name of the actual modern name of the city now, but all these bands like in and out of it. There was kind of a tightly knit group, and there was a band I was really into that happened to be from there, and the gentleman died, and I actually ended up airing it on the anniversary of his death. So I did that. I started the set with some of his projects specifically, worked my way down through through some people he had worked with, and then kind of the culmination was a band that like almost everybody that was anybody in that little tightly knit scene had been a part of at one point. So that was really satisfying. But yeah, it's just now it's just kind of like, well, what do I want to land on? And I just sort of just go forward, and it surprises people every time because there are just thousands of these little bands out there, like for every major band you've heard of, or even something shooting off of that, there's so many more, and there are so many scenes that you don't think about. I haven't found a lot in, say, like Africa, but like Botswana has a death metal scene, believe it or not. South Africa does, but it's honestly it's more white guys than anything, and some of them have like super not cool views, so I try to avoid that. So I focus on things like Indonesia or the Philippines, or some of my favorites are like Greece and France and Poland. Or I'll pick a particular artist and I'll do an hour off of them. Like last week, the singer Sven Gross from Flesh Crawl died of cancer a couple weeks ago. And I'm not a huge fan of that band, but I was like, they were at it for a while and the band has decided to continue without him. So I did 6 songs. I did a half hour of stuff, just every full length he was on. I picked a song and I did that. And then just rounded it out with more stuff from Germany.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to say, how do you go about digging on some of these things? Because I imagine if someone dropped the pin on Mankato from across the world and was like, well, I'm going to play an hour and a half of music from the Mankato music scene. Like, well, I can imagine what they might do to find it, but what's your process like? Are you looking into labels or individuals or bands? Or
I use I'd be a little lost without Metal Archives. I'm not going to lie. That site is amazing, and the team behind that they're a little fussy because sometimes they think things aren't metal enough, and then you can't actually have the details. But a lot of it's laid out right there. Or the nice thing about it is with a lot of these bands is they're all usually independent or smaller acts, and they want to get all their information out there, so it's not hard to find. So then you basically you look at their Bandcamp pages, or sometimes I pay attention to labels. I've done that I think more lately. I used to focus almost entirely on the artists in the early days, and then I started picking up on who is actually bringing about the good stuff, and so I look at that and try to use that as a springboard. Like, I don't do a lot of label spotlights exactly, but I will use that sometimes if I recognize something and I know that they crank out good stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of I use a lot of internet resources. I look for Last FM is occasionally useful. I'm trying to think of some other places I look. There's a couple of online magazines that I check out here and there, or look for. Lately, I've been finding some curated playlists by artists themselves. I forget the name of the website right now, but they'll be like, hey, I have a Finnish melodeath band, and here are my top 12, melodeath albums, and then you go off that and see if there's anything related to that. I look for side projects. I look for, like, oh, this guy worked with this guy. Okay, let's see what that's all about. I'll branch off from different acts that I know or scenes that I've heard of, and sort of, just sometimes it's just as simple as doing that, like just going Greek black metal, and throwing that into Google and seeing what you can find.
Yeah, I suppose this all started like right as the internet started being useful for that too. So
Yeah.
I mean, now everything must be like super optimized, but was it a totally different experience in 2001?
Oh yeah, definitely, and of course, and back then too. I mean, there weren't the resources, so it really was just kind of piecemeal. It was like, when MySpace came about, that was useful, but it was also like MySpace, so it was really hard to work with sometimes.
Isn't MySpace more useful now? Like MySpace is almost specifically for music now.
I haven't paid attention, but you're probably right. I haven't even looked in years.
Oh, I think the only thing that survived on there is band pages, and I know people still use it for music. I don't. And I don't know anyone who does, but I've heard multiple people say that.
I think allegedly I may still have a MySpace for the show. I have no idea. I know there's a Blogspot page out there somewhere with some really old playlists, and everything else I moved to Facebook, but and even then I'm woefully behind. But yeah, finding the resources at first was, I mean, actually, now that I think about it, actually, one of my earlier resources were metal magazines, like especially like Brave Words and Bloody Knuckles and Terrorizer and what was that little one? A little digest size one. The Zero Tolerance was one, and they all came with like samplers.
Oh my gosh, I remember that now.
Yeah, those little sampler discs.
Yeah,
those things are amazing. That would so come in handy. It would just be. You could usually, and sometimes it would be, especially Brave Words they were kind of in the pocket of a couple of labels. So you'd get a lot of exposure to like late 90s Napalm Records, gothic metal and stuff like that. And because it was easy to get a hold of, I had a gothic metal phase for a while, before, like, I don't know, before romance died in my heart. And no, just kidding. But no, I mean, like, but I mean, yeah, we had a couple of drippy early shows, but yeah, like, but it really does depend on what you have available to you. And of course, the other thing there was, the scope of my interest at the time was also, still pretty small. So I had to kind of pick and choose, based on what I thought worked with the show and also, jived with me. I mean, I still won't play certain things, but I'm not necessarily I don't think that the bands that I pick all represent me. I more look at it as a way to have a foray into a certain scene or a certain sound. So, some things are more difficult to work with than others.
What sort of characteristics do you use to identify whether it's the sounds you're looking for or the genres? You mentioned some black metal or heavy metal. Yeah.
That gets, the thing is, of course, since I'm not a musician, that gets difficult because I don't have a good verbal way sometimes to render that. But I'll look for like a certain riff structure, or I'll look for a certain kind of timing. I pay a lot of attention to sort of timing, pitch, certain kinds of vocals sometimes. For a while, I was kind of halfway making up genres because there are certain orthodox black metal bands, and that's a whole conversation there. But because what that means in terms of the sound is almost a totally separate thing from the content itself. And some genres are based around content rather than sound more. But I was getting into a lot of these bands that had sort of a theatrical sound in a way that didn't have traditional black metal vocals, and the lyrics were usually very, very dark occult stuff. And so I started referring to it as serious black metal, and then I realized how dumb that sounded. So then I started, like, when I'd write that in my notebook, I would write SRS, like the internet abbreviation for like Sirs Black Metal, and I would do that and sort of. But yeah, it really comes down to like, a few weeks ago I did a show where it was, I pretty much just went, I want to play bands with this particular pitch of vocals, like death metal bands that had like a very, very, very fierce. I can't do it, but or I try, but a very certain kind of delivery where it was just very in your face, very up in the mix, and just very present. And so I started digging around, just kind of noodling around for that. That hour took a while, just because of my requirements for that one were very specific. Other times, it's something as simple as going, well, I want to do like I did a gore grind hour last week. So I just went, what are some gore grind bands I haven't checked out in a while or haven't ever heard of that are in and around the same area, and just kind of dove into it from there. So it is kind of it's hard. Like I said, it's hard to talk about specifically what I'm looking for because I can't tell you, what time signature or what, what key they're playing in or anything like that. I mean, there's, metal kind of falls within a certain sonic range, obviously, but there's still so much variance. There's so many things you can do with just that. I mean, black metal itself is such a plastic term at this point that it can mean everything from, what everybody thinks of is that second wave Norwegian stuff, but it really can be everything all the way out through, post black metal, where they're working in post rock sounds and stuff like that, and clean vocals. Like, I don't know, have you guys heard of Death Heaven before?
Yeah, I was gonna not try and embarrass myself by naming one of the three bands, but that would have been one of the three bands that I was introduced to. Someone was like, listen to Sunbather, and I was like, oh, I get it. Like, I like this a lot.
Yeah, it's an interesting record too. And of course, then there's that thing with those guys, like, bands like that where some of the old guard kind of guys are like, oh, that's garbage. They're selling out because they don't wear makeup and they don't, do whatever. But yeah,
yeah, they're cool. And like, I got that from a post rock website. I don't know which one it was, but I mean, that's music that I really like. So I heard about that. And that was some of the first times where extreme vocals or even mildly extreme vocals appealed to me. I was like, it took me a couple times to listen to it, and I was like looking forward to that part of the album. And I was like, all right,
it's interesting. Yeah. And it's kind of like any other thing that has limited appeal, be it, comic books or, like genre film or anything like that. You get in where you get in. You really do. And so many people, I think, especially I've noticed this with people younger than me, which, I'm getting up there. I'm in my early 40s, but a lot of like the kind of the Wikipedia approach to taking on a genre of media, it takes the fun out of the exploration for me. Like I when people say that they, they don't read comics, they read summaries of comics on the internet and things like that. I roll my eyes because that's not how you should do it. You should just grab something. And it's the same thing with any kind of a band or a scene. Like, I landed where I landed because I happened to be in that record store and I bought that album because it had a cool cover. And lo and behold, I've been a Behemoth fan, for example, for 20 years because I bought Thelema 6 at Toontown because I liked the cover and he had it and it was like $7. That's I mean, some of those things are just happy accidents, and you just, you roll with it, and you don't have to know everything. You have not right away anyway, and not even now. there's still pockets that I'm not familiar with, and it's always fun to find that stuff.
I like how you mentioned like when you grouped things by kind of like a vocal range of that, because I imagine that would probably put a lot of music that some people might not put side by side together in the first place. And I feel like, and I'm no expert here, but metal is kind of like one of those genres in general that is specialized enough where it's mostly like electronic music, where it's nerds who are willing to fight about it.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Every that's why I don't do message boards and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't go on Reddit and talk about music because it's people will die on. It's just unbelievable. And then I don't even want to launch into it. It's so disgusting sometimes. Like what they're willing to argue is, is poser stuff and what isn't. stuff like, I mean, there's the terminology you hear, like the true cult and whatever, all that garbage. Like, there's stuff that sucks. There are bands that just don't get it, and they are out and out. And I've tried to be less like the voice of the like try to be an authoritative voice about it. I'm just trying to go, well, that just doesn't work, and it's not going to be on my show. That's usually what I do. Like, but there are some bands that don't get it that try really hard, and it's sad. But that's so much individual taste. I mean, I try. There's what I like, and then there's what I think I can put on the air. There's that. I try to maintain that distance at least a little bit, where I go, oh, it'd be really great to do this. I'm not super into this, or I'm not feeling it this week. But I'll do it anyway. Like, for example, actually, Post Black is one that I don't do a lot of. I actually really don't like Alcest, and people throw chairs at me when I bring it up because it just doesn't vibe with me.
I mean, I don't know how similar like post rock vibes are to post black metal vibes in general, but I would kind of laugh at the idea of a post rock radio show, because it doesn't, like, people listen to the radio when they're at work, when they're in the car, and when they're walking around. So like, it's actually great for metal, because a lot of these songs are like between 1 minute and 2.5 minutes long. Yeah. And then like a post rock song, it's like regularly 7 minutes long. Like, that's annoying, like to watch someone listen to post rock in general. Like, you give someone a Godspeed You Black Emperor album, and you're like, will you enjoy this for me? Like, on my terms?
I mean, I'll admit, sometimes I'll have some weeks where, there's doom. And so you'd get into longer songs sometimes. And I'll admit, like, once you get past about the 10-minute mark, I'm like, someone's going to be pissed. This isn't going to work. This is not going to work. But I'll do it if it's good enough. If Tyranny puts out a new album, this band from Finland, that is just like, that is funeral doom. That is the band for that genre. I'm just dropping stuff here and there, not to just to do it. But anyway, like, if they put out an album and the best song on the album happens to be 16 minutes long, I probably won't play that whole song. I'll usually fade it down, a few minutes beforehand, but I'll probably play it, just to do it. But yeah, I can't even, that's something I struggle with a lot, actually, is I have no idea sometimes how listenable some of those hours are, because I will do I regularly do 20-minute blocks of music without talking. Sometimes if it's a particular vibe, or if I'm really tired, sometimes I'll do a 40-minute block, or I'll do, like, my third hour is sort of where I experiment a lot, and I'll get into just the really dungeony, like, really weird crap. Like, I was talking a little bit with you guys before we started recording about Maurice de Jong, who is this one-man, multi-instrumentalist from the Netherlands, and he kicks out like 17 basement metal projects a year, and some of those things, I mean, it's super weird. Like, some of it gets into like basically like noise, blackened noise metal and stuff like that, where it's just inhuman, and I can only handle it for so long. And while I'm putting it together, like putting an hour together of either just his stuff or stuff that is similar to that. And I don't know always if that's, I don't know. I look at it as it kind of depends on the listener's approach. Are you trying to, are you using it as a backdrop while you do something else, or are you doing some really focused listening? And my take on it, where the chair I'm sitting is, I'm trying to just, curate a good list and give people signposts to find stuff that they might otherwise not find. So, with something like that, like a really harsh list, like a really specialized thing, I'll let it go for most of that hour and just let them immerse themselves. And I don't always have the confidence that that's the best approach to take, but I also don't know if it would be good if I chimed in after every song and went, well, wasn't that spectacular, or doesn't that evoke this? I can do that, but I don't always feel the need, because I think, if I just burble on about my own feelings about it, that could get a little tiresome, and that eats up a lot of time that could be spent on finding people other bands. I think I'm an okay showman sometimes, but I focus way more on, kicking out a good playlist.
Yeah.
Right on.
I think that with extreme music like that, anything that's weird or experimental, I think just putting it on and having people experience it kind of.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
if you're flipping through a dial and it makes you pause for a second, you might stay.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
like that's how I found a lot of music like that. Spotify playlists and stuff. Like,
yeah.
Sometimes playlists like minimalism or something like that will have something just really weird on it. Like what's a good example? On minimalism, what is how I was exposed to Matmos, I think. And I probably wouldn't have listened to it without that context there, but now I've probably gone over Ultimate Care like 6 times, and it's just like I think it's awesome now. And I guess I'm nerding out here, but that's fine.
An album. I like that. I know I'm digging it because that's nerd passion is what I'm all about. Be it in almost every sphere of my life, but specifically, like I like hearing stories about like how when people find what they find and it's perfect. That's what and I've had a few of those with my stuff too, and I've even had people, weirdly enough, recognize my voice at shows. Like Twin Cities metal shows. And I've had people, like not a lot, but a few people recognize my voice and come up and talk to me. And I've met a ton of really cool people, because of things like that.
Well, to be fair, and also when we were doing the Sunday Fun Days out on the patio, we had you. I think you brought more people than anyone else, and I mean, like that was just blaring your show for an hour downtown in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Which
I just
very
basically put
gleeful
together.
for me.
That was awesome. And then you guys were like, well, sound. You can just play stuff while we sound check. And I'm like, really? Okay. And it was great. It was incredibly gratifying. That was of all the things I've done off the air with this show, that was intensely gratifying. I'm very, very grateful to you both. That was so much fun. That's cool. I had one of my best friends showed up for that, and he was like, "Yeah, I could hear you like 3-4 blocks away." He's like, and he was like, "That was so good." Just hearing it. And he's not even a huge extreme metal guy, but he was just like, "That's just neat to see that, to hear it, and see it shake windows and stuff."
Yeah,
that was such a fun playlist. I have that all written down. I still have. Well, I do. I'm like down here. What I've got. This is the current show notebook. I actually handwrite all my playlists. It's part of what makes it stick in my mind. So I keep all that stuff. I have they all get just beat to hell, but I keep them. Because it's nice to go back and revisit them, even if I do transcribe it to the internet when I have the ambition to do it. Which I'm like 4 months behind. It's terrible, but I like having that. And it, going back and looking at just like weird little marginalia I was writing at the time, and that set for Red Rocks for the patio. That was kind of it was like a lot of favorites. And a lot of shout outs to certain people that I knew were going to be there. But then it was also like a couple of those were just to kick the living hell out of the patio, just to, like there was, what was it? It was a slam metal band from, I think, like Denmark or Belgium or something. I can't remember the name of them for the life of me right now, but that album had just come out, and it was just, That is just stupid caveman death metal. It is just like, don't get me wrong, I'm playing an hour of that stuff Friday, but like, because it's just entertainingly dumb, but and they know it. Most of those guys know it. There's a lot of like puns in the song titles. I've done stand up about slam just because it's so stupid, and listed like, well, there's the word slam is in the name of the band, the record, and the song. So we've got multiple slammage here, but I mean just that song, playing that and just watching people like turn around like, what in the hell is going on? That was super fun. Blasting everything from that to melodic Greek black metal. I played a Rotting Christ song that was entirely in Greek. That was fun. That was a great set. That was super, super cool. And I want to do more stuff like that. I'm actually hoping to set something like that up somewhere in the recent future. What's kind of screwing that up right now is that I'm moving into a new place, and so that's where all my time's going. But I'm going to try and hopefully hook something up for this fall, like either late summer or fall to further commemorate the show.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is there much like live bands playing around this area in those genres at all?
No, not really. No, I'm not even sure anybody. I mean, we have had. I mean, for a long time, the only death metal band in the area was Face of Oblivion, and that was fronted by James Lee, who used to sing for Origin, which is a band out of Kansas, and he did work on other projects. He would fill in for vocalists, touring vocalists. I remember, but yeah, he was fronting that band, and then they got a guy from Incinerate up in the cities to come down after the band kind of reshuffled, and then they changed names and massively changed membership. And I'm not even sure who's doing what right now. I think honestly all of that might be kaput. I'm not aware of, other than like a few people noodling around and trying to get something going, I'm not aware of any projects right now. So if anybody out there is doing extreme metal in the area and you want to get on the air, come find me. I'm not that hard to find, and I'd be happy to help you. So, but yeah, like there's not much. I've actually been thinking also about branching into booking shows now that shows are going to be a thing again. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much it would cost to get my favorite Minnesota band down here, but I'm going to try. And that's a band called Suffering Hour, and they do something that's kind of, I don't know. For again, I'll try and coach. I'll try to render it as best I can without having musician terms to use, but they kind of sound like Incantation a little bit, but it's this kind of like ominous sort of deep nasty vocal, really like just gross riffs, and some black metal in the mix too, but they are the nastiest thing in Minnesota right now. There are a lot of great bands out of the Twin Cities. There are, I believe, some bands in Duluth and Rochester still.
Are they like fast or slow paced?
Suffering Hour?
Yeah.
The drumming, the percussion is faster, but the riffs are usually kind of mid to slow. Sometimes they go a little faster, but it's kind of, I should probably shoot you guys some links, that you can put up as an accompaniment for we could just find their Bandcamp and put it on there, because
we can throw it in the description for sure.
Yeah, that'd be cool. They're amazing. They are absolutely amazing. But yeah, of course, there's, a lot of the stuff I was connected with early on. A lot of those guys are either not, they're doing different projects, or they are, or they're dead. Earl Root died, Don Decker died. Those were the two big figures in the Twin Cities extreme metal scene for a very long time, and they're both gone. And a lot of the guys that are left over, that used to play in some of those bands, have new projects. Brian Owens from Demonicon, he has a band called Krog that's amazing. There's let's see here. Plague of Stars is another band, from the Twin Cities. That's Will and Melissa Furlock. I'm trying to think, I can't remember any of Rob Carlson's stuff right now. For whatever reason, I'm drawing a blank. Rob's cool. He does good stuff. There are a lot of really cool musicians, and I was actually shocked lately just to find that there were a bunch of bands that I had not that I hadn't heard about, like False and Obsequiae and stuff like that are just really out there. False unfortunately broke up, but like Obsequiae is this weird sort of like medieval themed atmospheric black metal project, and you just don't expect that to come out of the Twin Cities suburbs. There's
So all these are regional that you're saying here?
Yeah, this is all regional stuff. This is all Minnesota stuff. Wow. There's a dude, where is he? He's in Bloomington, and I've even emailed him, and I still don't know what his name is because he's real secretive. But he does. It's the project's called Book of Sand, and he's it's like super leftist black metal. It's like real, so politically he and I, we get along great. But he kicks out these really strange records. At one point he adapted a bunch of medieval songs for black metal. And then, but then he also just does more traditional stuff. Sometimes he's all over the map. He does all kinds of really, really neat, everything from like lo-fi to fairly well produced stuff. And I think it's just him and maybe one other musician here and there.
What's the real difference? I feel like there's a lot of hard rock and like there's some stoner stuff and there's some stuff that chugs around Mankato.
Yeah.
Having been exposed to that, like what's the difference between that and extreme metal?
It's kind of some of the musical DNA is a little different. Like, you trace most of this stuff through thrash to those genres. So there's sort of but there's also, I don't know, depending on what you're looking at. There's like tons of punk in the DNA of like Swedish death metal, but so I think the closest thing we get actually right now is probably God Awful Bastards, which is sort of like crust punk more.
That's what I was referring to when I said stuff that chugs.
Yeah, exactly. So, like there's sort of, I think the big difference there is it's more loose, like musically. The bands around here they're more based in more of a rock and roll approach than say a tighter, more like thrash or faster or nastier approach. And that doesn't, I'm not in any way diminishing what anybody's doing.
Different.
Yeah, it's just different stuff. And I think that's an attitude thing. I think too. I think it's, you have to have that mindset, and that's part of why the lyrics are what they are for a lot of those bands, is because you can't sing about your feelings when you're playing black metal unless your feelings are particularly dark. Like if you're the dude, if you're Scott Connor from Zaster and you're writing about killing yourself, then sure. That's I still laugh. There was a documentary on One Man Black. You can see this on YouTube. Scott Connor, was one of the darkest figures in depressive black metal, and they're interviewing him, and then his cat comes in the room, and he just totally just softens up. He's like, "Aw," like he's just from like, my fans should just off themselves, and then it's just like, "Oh, baby," it's so good. But again, it's like I remember the interviews with the early like Florida scene guys like Morbid Angel and Cannibal Corpse, where they were talking about how people were genuinely worried because we're getting out of the Satanic Panic. And actually I have a theory about the Satanic Panic and extreme metal I'll launch into it in a second here, but they're like, look, we're just telling horror stories with songs. That's all we're doing. We're not advocating any kind of real violence. We're saying, we want the music is appropriate to this.
Yeah.
So
people have always, the news has always purposefully misunderstood entertainment.
Yeah.
Like it's happened over and over again. Marilyn Manson's a jackass, but like, you know what I mean? Like he's purposefully misunderstood. Quentin Tarantino has been purposely misunderstood.
Oh, yeah.
He won't even answer a question like, what does violence mean to you? It's like, shut up. Ask me a relevant question about my life and my work. It's been done 1,000 times.
Right. What I was going to say about the whole Satanic Panic thing too is I honestly, for me, it's funny because what got me into heavier metal was that the Satanic Panic was about bands that weren't threatening at all, in my opinion. Like when I was a kid, I grew up largely in the 80s and 90s. So when all these bands came forward and like Dee Snider's getting grilled in front of a Senate subcommittee and whatever, all that, he testified. And I think John Denver even testified at those hearings about, them trying to squelch musical freedom. None of that stuff was threatening to me. It's like Ozzy Osbourne. That's good stuff, but I'm not in mortal fear of my soul or anything like that. I wasn't, so because of that, I honestly think that metal went more underground and got darker because that wasn't there other than a few select places, and most of those were bands that, Tom Warrior of Hellhammer and Celtic Frost was doing, like there just wasn't a lot out there. So that whole focus on, this is, won't someone think of the children? Some of those children went, we can do something that's actually evil.
Yeah.
And they did. and now some of those guys are in their 50s, and we've got, later generations of nastier and nastier stuff. The Indonesian scene is something I point to a lot for that. I have conversations with my friend Tom, who's one of my listeners, like I brought up before, about how we're never going to run out of music. We're never going to, even for guys that have very specific requirements. Like we're super into certain little genres. We're never going to run out of stuff because like Indonesia is a hotbed of like 15-year-old kids learning how to play double bass and do gravity blasts and play this insane tortured stuff. And it's so exciting. It's so cool. And in some places that has become like a form of protest music. You can get locked up for wearing a Cinderella t-shirt in Malaysia yet to this day, because it's considered, it's Western culture in general, I think is what it is, like because of their like religious laws and things like that, that they see that as a threat. So in some places around the world, working in, Western style music or taking on that sort of, fuck it, bring it on attitude, that threatens the local order. There are bands from the Middle East that have had to relocate. Melakesh from Israel had to move to the Netherlands because they kept getting threatened by the religious authorities, and their stuff isn't even satanic. It was about pre-Christian, Abrahamic religions. It was all, ancient gods and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah.
When a lot of these like hotbeds for this extreme music, they seem to like, it seems to be extremely popular in some areas.
Yeah, it does.
It's like what's the common thread that kind of like runs through those scenes? Is it just, do they just love the sound? And
I think it is. I think it's just the because if you ever sit down with a really heavy record, and even if it's in the background and it's best if you're doing something else, if you're, anything from organizing your desk to tiling your basement, anything like that. I think it's good work music. I think it really is. But I think it's that the way that something like that surrounds the air with all this ferocity, it actually balances against your own internal, for me at least, your own internal turmoil. So it puts out things in the air that you can't even say. For me at least, it's because I deal with all kinds of, we all do. We all have things going on, and we all have things we struggle with that are terrifying or just hard to process. And I think by having something sort of either mirror or even exceed that in your environment, that gives you a little way to sort of balance against it, or, to have something echoing your problems, or sometimes it's just to get your blood pumping. It really is. A lot of people I know will use metal for workout stuff. They lift weights to it. It's good for stimulating a gut response. It's just something that's hard to render in words, hard to even, to communicate in anything other than a physiological feeling. That can be true of any genre, but I find with something as urgent and driving as a very, very heavy record, that hits you right in your gut, and you can go with that. It'll make you move.
Cool. What have you been? What's been in your ears a lot lately? Like maybe not exactly what you're playing on the show, but what have you been into?
It's funny. In the last couple of years, I've been digging back into a lot of old bands I was into in high school and early college. So I've been revisiting Typo Negative a fair amount. I've been, how toxic some of the songs are notwithstanding, but just sonically, that band is just brilliant. Revisiting, I was a big Faith No More kid in high school.
Pat and Touches,
He's amazing. He's amazing. Yeah. I was a big industrial guy too, and I've been kind of revisiting that with some people. It was funny because when you approached me about DJing on the patio, I went, "Oh crap! I have a few industrial CDs," and you were just like, "No, do your thing," and I'm like, "Good, thank you," because I can't. I've got and I've got one Sister Machine Gun album. That's not going to get me through this, guys. Like I've got some KMFDM and a couple of other things, but that's not going to. But no, I've been revisiting last year's Paradise Lost album a great deal, and they're a band that it's a really interesting arc because they started as they invented doom death for one thing, like death metal that had slower, more brooding elements. They worked in some female vocals on some of their early albums, and then they have this arc. They go up. They sort of embrace sort of this like kind of somber but sort of thrashy vibe, and then they hit goth rock with the Host album, and then they started a downslope, and now these last like 3 records have been back in the doom death territory, but now they're playing with it. Like they hit back to maximum heaviness, but with a lot of polish. And now they're back up experimenting back with clean vocals more, because I mean their singer Nick Holmes, he can do anything you ask him to do, and he's been filling in. He took over as vocalist for another like death metal supergroup in the last few years called Bloodbath. They used to have Mike from Opeth on that, but I think Mike only wants to do prog these days, and that's why I don't listen to Opeth anymore. But anyway, but no, Paradise Lost is always pretty present with me, regardless of the era. I actually went on when I drove home to go to Easter, I threw the Host album in, and that is maximum drippy, goth rock. It's almost all electronic, but it still has some common elements in terms of like the timing and the weight of it, and he still occasionally writes really, really woeful lyrics. Like they're just not good, but he delivers them well. So if nothing else, that's okay. But it's got, I pop back and forth between stuff like that. Let's see here. Danzig has been a thing lately again. Like Danzig 2 and 3 have been a thing lately, regardless of all the dumb things he's been saying lately. But, that and, let's see. Well, Anal Nathrak, of course, that's my favorite band though. That's, and that's they're their own genre. That's like, it's like blackened industrial grindcore basically, but they've branched out a little bit from there into
serious metal.
I have no idea. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's 2 guys and then whoever they can pick up if they want side people, but they kick out a new record every couple of years, and I'm still going back to the one from last fall, Endarkenment. That one's really good, and all their stuff hits like a truck. It's amazing, for what they do, and they do vary it up enough that it's not just the same album again and again and again. But I'm always in the mood for that. I used to have to do a lot of driving. Like I was dating somebody who had like a nanny gig up in the cities, and I'd drop her off on one day of the week, and then I'd and then drive back to get her in a few days, and sometimes I'd just be absolutely exhausted, and Anal Nathrak's Dominant Non Est Dignus album saved my life on more than one occasion, because it's just so damn mean you can't fall asleep. Yeah. So
I'll have to keep that in my back pocket in
there
case
you go.
I'm ever
So
getting
mean
drowsy.
you can't fall asleep.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And go on.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, and for myself, typically the tracks that I like, that I've been exposed to from this have been the slower, heavier, more on the doom side.
Yeah.
I've heard a little bit of the funeral doom stuff, but not too much. But if you're gonna give me some recommendation from the last couple of years, because I haven't even touched any of that stuff in probably 3 years now.
Yeah. Okay. Gosh, I'm trying to think. I did a Doom Death Hour. Gosh, how long ago was this? It was maybe 6 months ago or something, where it was like really early stuff, and some of that I remember being particularly interesting. But honestly, I would go with Gothic by Paradise Lost is a good one. That's just a classic. And then probably for weird stuff, probably early Septic Flesh. That gets into almost like avant-garde-ish sort of atmospheric stuff. With Funeral Doom, Tyranny or Worship, because it's just, I mean, the vocals are way the hell down here, and it just rumbles like a storm at you.
Yeah,
It's
it drones.
I've
I've heard Worship before. I don't think I've heard Tyranny.
Yeah. Tyranny. Yeah. I mean, a lot of that old Finnish stuff is kind of similar. I'm trying to think of some other bands that would also sort of fit in into like the post-black sort of Death Heaven-y area. I used to straight up refer to it as hipster black metal on the air sometimes, but it has its place, and sometimes it really does work. I haven't done a set of that stuff in a while. One of my buddies really likes Falls of Raros for that band, for that area, and they're pretty good. I can usually work them, and actually I'm about to do. This will probably be next week, I think. I'm gonna do a set of German black metal that sort of like verges up on that. It's not quite post-black, but it has a lot of sort of like thoughtful pacing to it. Like Lunar Aurora is one of the bands, Totgelichter, stuff like that. The new Totgelichter stuff is terrible. It's so bad. It's not even metal anymore. But like, but for Doom, it's delicate, but honestly, like early... I mean, again, I was talking about like you don't necessarily have to start at the beginning, but in this case, I almost think like early My Dying Bride would be interesting because it's got enough weird raw elements. Like they get really polished, and honestly, they totally abandon like the death vocals after a while, and that doesn't quite sit with me because I don't like Aaron Stanhope's vocals as much. Like he's a little too nasally, kind of sounds like a Tim Burton character, like a. So like, you just gotta like it just sounds like he should be singing in like The Corpse Bride or something after a while. But the music is phenomenal. It really, really is. But the vocals just kind of kill it for me for that. But like early My Dying Bride or Anathema, early Peaceful Records stuff, honestly, would be a nice place to start. But I think I don't know. I'm excited by the idea of like actually trying to find a playlist of stuff that falls into more the post-black and related. Like if I was going to shoot you a bunch of recommendations, that's where I would land for you. That's something. And now I got something to work with for an hour. I can just be like, Jacob did it. You know, like this is
blame me.
Yeah. You know.
Nice.
And that would be on. Yeah, I was already kind of leaning on that German thing already. So it's like that sounds fun. And again, there you have it. Boom, magic.
Yeah.
What with curating these things, how much or how often do old stuff come back around and kind of get a refresh on the show?
It depends on if we're kind of in a dry period, and we're really not, because 2020 was great for music and terrible for humanity. So, there's like all kinds of new projects. A lot of people were collaborating across international borders. But if it's old, it kind of, again, it depends on sort of what mood I get in. I am a lot more focused on new music a lot of the time, but if it's something like I did a tribute set for LG Petrov, who was the singer for Entombed. He died, a few months ago. And so what I did, because I've done sets of just Entombed stuff, and I was like, well, let's do something else. So I went back and I did a song off of the first album by all Swedish death metal bands, so all really old stuff. So Dismember, Grave, Unleashed. I'm trying to think of who else I did. Like Exhumation, I think maybe. But yeah, like I did the big four, and then I grabbed a bunch of little bands that. And what was kind of cool about that scene too was that there were a bunch of bands that sort of went away for a while and then reformed, or one member reformed the band. And so now we have these guys still active and doing stuff again. Wombbath is a good example of that, where they were gone for like 15 years, and now they're cranking out music again. It's like they're on like new album number 3 or 4. So yeah, so I went back and I found the first Wombbath, and I went and I grabbed all that, and then, but as far as stuff I've used in a given year, it coming back, maybe once or twice, 3-4 times if it's something I really like. I'm always just trying to just drown people in new music or stuff that's new to me and likely then new to them.
So pretty fresh lists and stuff.
Yeah, nice. Definitely. It changes drastically from week to week unless I've occasionally gotten on a kick where I can't shake something for a while. I had a blackened sludge metal kick a few years ago that it was like every other week practically. I would be playing stuff like, like Coffin Rot and stuff like that, and it was fun. But then I realized I was in a rut and I had to change it.
There wasn't like an intervention or anything.
No, nobody sat down like put down the album, put the CDs away. No, it wasn't anything like that. If left to my own devices and I'm really like having a tough time, I will land on Incantation really hard and bands like Incantation. And there's a fair. It's funny, of all places. I read an NPR article about how Incantation may be the Velvet Underground of death metal, where like there's just so many bands out there that are influenced by them that sound a lot like them, or you pick up elements of them in those acts that you don't realize until you actually step back and look at it. And I found that that's one of my favorite niches in extreme metal. So it's something I if nothing else, or if frankly one or 5 different bands put out a record, I can just grab that and go. And the new Drawn and Quartered just came out, or it's actually out Friday. So when I get that, it's going to be go time on that stuff again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool to hear. I like I liked hearing about the way that you curate stuff, especially for specific kind of. You mentioned a couple of situations where you were playing. Someone had passed, and you were doing kind of an.
Tribute
show, and the different ways. You mentioned a couple of different ways that you did it, and I think that's neat to have a diverse approach and kind of figure out what works for each situation. And
like I said, I used to
shows.
really overthink it, and now it's just kind of I just land where I land, and it's like, can I build something off this? And the answer now usually is yes. I have a lot more confidence about it than I used to, I think, and part of it was that for years I felt I was kind of a latecomer to the scene. I wasn't really into it when a lot of the early stuff was happening. I found it later. But then I dove super deep. And now that I've come to terms with that, I feel that I can just kind of grab anything. And that's, again, I mean, I don't consider myself anything more than a guy who has been lucky enough to have, to be able to volunteer at a public radio station and do whatever he wants. But I also feel that there's about a bit of responsibility with that I have to do something that, it's almost because there's no money involved that I feel like I have to do something that really meets my standards. I'm not doing it because someone else is telling me to do it. I'm doing it because I think this is the correct way to do it. But I second guess certain parts of the process, but the actual playlist itself, I know that if I land with something and it's viable, I can build that into something that will make a full hour and that will be a complete enough package that somebody can get something out of it.
Mm-hmm. What what does the future of the show look like? You got any vision for that?
I want to branch out a little bit here and there into trying to put on events in town, become more involved in things like that. I'd like to do more DJing live. If I ever get enough vinyl, I'll try and do sound clash with the other KMSU DJs, but getting the stuff I like on vinyl is insanely expensive. So unless you buy it like right when it comes out, and even then sometimes. So I probably won't be doing that as much. I want to do more stuff with, my fellow hosts. Actually, I was hanging out with Tom Heffernan last night a little bit, and we did a collaborative show once a few years ago, and we had a blast. So that's something to look forward to. Beyond that, I'm just gonna kind of keep on keeping on. I'm just gonna keep doing more shows, doing more events where I can. I wanna offer something, because right now we don't have anyone promoting metal shows in town. We don't have anybody organizing much of that. And I want to have a hand in that. I shied away from it for a while because I didn't think I had, the right connections or the right know-how, and I still probably don't have all of that, but I can find people, I feel now, more than I did, say, a few years ago. I think that my ties on that front are a little stronger. I know a few more people, and I can probably get it done.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to do. It's probably one of the biggest dead horses that I beat, is that people need to really work on curating cultures and, bringing things in so people aspire to participate in them.
Right.
And whether that's a stage or a scene or, whatever, kids hear that. They're like, I want to open for that. I want to do that. I want to be part of that. And you got to start a shitty band and suck for a while. And but unless you do that, then we don't have a good music scene, you can't import it all. And we do have a cool music scene here.
We do. And it's neat when you get to know some of those people and you kind of just see what the, what's going on and what people can crank out, just even if they just are screwing around, for a weekend.
Totally.
Yeah. Like Ocho, I've seen Ocho do so many different things with so many different people, and he's just, he's hot to do it all. He loves, working with people.
He started in extreme metal. I mean, I believe, he talks about that, quite a bit. Back in Pierre, Illinois.
South Dakota.
South Dakota. Yeah. Pierre, South Dakota. And, they were just doing it to do it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, let's do some plugs. Let's shout out the show.
Sure.
Or anything else we want to touch on?
I think we got it. I anything else would be kind of just belaboring. I mean, I you'll get a feel for it if you haven't tuned in before. Generally, what it is, it's a 3-hour show from 9 to midnight on Fridays. That's 89.7 FM. You can also listen live on KMSU.org. And we archive shows for 2 weeks. So if you miss something, you can go to the website and you can stream it there. And that's true for not only my program, but others. And then let's see here. I'm trying to think of what else I can bring up. I have a Facebook page. It's facebook.com/HTB Dragons KMSU. You can contact me on that. I put up playlists when I have time. If you have requests, you can also email me. It's htbdragons@hotmail.com. That same email account from when I started.
2001.
Yep.
Reared its head.
Yep. It's been there the whole time. I get a lot of garbage, but I also, I don't hear from enough people, and I really would like to know where people's interests lie. If there's something, like if I do something and they want to hear it again, or if they don't get it, or, I probably won't stop doing something. I got a call one time from a guy who was like, I don't like this angry music. And I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about it a little bit. And he's like, and essentially it came down to that he just didn't like it. But he also tried to discuss the social merits of, his taste in music. And I'm like, that's fine, man. And he brought up, things like there are, Nazi black metal bands. And I went, yeah, I know. And I don't play them. And I told him exactly what I look for and how I ferret that out. And so, it was a meaningful interaction, and I hope he understood. But I am looking for feedback. I am looking for more participation. And I think by doing more live events and stuff like that, that's something I'm going to try and do. So, I don't know, watch the skies or what have you. I'll be trying to get something going for a live DJ gig again sometime soon, and I'm hoping by sometime in August or September, and then maybe try to make it into a regular thing. I'm also, again, I'm going to try and look into booking some bands too. That's about. Other than that, every Friday you'll be able to find the show, and hopefully, people tune in and find something they like.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you guys. Cool. This was great.
Yeah, and playing music for 20 years straight. That's cool too.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks
Congratulations.
A lot. I've had yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, again, it'll be about, I think the actual anniversary is August 10th. But the Friday that week is the 13th, so that'll be the anniversary broadcast. And then, we'll see what else I can cook up. But it's intensely gratifying when I run into people and they're like, yeah, I've been listening to you for years, or I've caught this once or twice and I need to know who the hell that was, That's always fun. So thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Keep it up.